Infrastructure Leader Shankar here. I'm here to talk about a short video on leadership styles and their capability to handle volatile situations. And during this video, I'm going to share my real-time experience on how I faced the various challenges during my growth curve. Right? So we're talking about volatility, we're talking about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. Now these four terms would decide on how the leadership is going to drive the organization forward and how the other people are going to follow the leader. So it's important that a leadership has the capability to handle these four roadblocks, because that is the key in terms of how the organization is going to follow him. Now moving to the next slide, we're talking about why is this so important topic. Now when we talk about handling VUCA, we're talking about leaders trying to make decisions under various conditions. It's not always true that the situation in the organization is always looking fabulous and clean. So we're talking about volatile conditions. You're releasing a product and response lacks. You release a product and there's a competitive product which comes with very different features and you are completely outdated. Or you're talking about a product that you want to try to put yourself in the market leadership, and you don't have support coming in from the people, right? All of a sudden people are beginning not to respond. So these are things where we talk about leadership style and the ability to handle this volatile situation. So when we talk about VUCA characteristics, we're talking about making decisions when we talk and move forward, plan risks and foster change. Now change characteristics is the important trait in leadership, not only to manage himself, but his ability to foster change in the people down this span of control, which is talking about culture, right? Change being induced as part of the culture. So in general, if you talk about VUCA, as I said, VUCA will tend to shape the organization. So it's important that when you have a leader who's focused on VUCA, handling his ability to handle volatile situation, he would know that he would have these five characteristics, right? One is his anticipation of issues would shape the conditions of the organization. He will anticipate proactively, he would see everything in terms of people's movement, in terms of body language, in terms of market response. He would know how to anticipate the issues. His ability to anticipate will be very good. Second of all, he would know that if he has to take a decision, what are the consequences or issues associated with his decision. He will be able to anticipate it. Second of all, he would appreciate all the variables that is associated with his decision, right? When he's making a decision, what are the variables he will consider? Because he is the person who knows his organization very well. So he would know what the variables are. In real situation, in terms of how to face things, he would not hesitate, right? He would have to find alternative realities and challenges when he knows that he lacks a few properties in the organization, right? So he would prepare. He would not sit down and think. He would prepare everything for how to move forward. And then he would interpret, right? So based on the so-called how he anticipates, how he's going to see the consequences and the variables and in terms of the alternative realities, he'll interpret and address the all relevant opportunity in all contexts. What I'm saying is a leadership with the ability to handle volatile situation will enable the organization to prepare and face the market. So that is what I'm talking about, why a leader should have the ability to handle volatile condition. Now let me move in terms of what are the three ways to be an effective, how to handle it, a VUCA environment very effectively, right? One is for you to understand the situation, right, much better before you make the decision. The leadership should have the tendency to ask questions, right? You should ask questions. More questions, good, but not to repeat the same question again and again and trying to create more frustration, but ask more relevant question. An association between two issues should be questioned, yes. And then we're talking about once you get your whole thing done, you'll have to have the ability to translate this effectively, right? Which means we're talking about interpret well, right? it shouldn't happen that you have a different problem, you get your different data and you interpret it in a different way, and then your decision goes all of in the right opposite way. Second of all, what we're talking about is communicate clearly, right? So, we're talking about people with a like mind, right? When you're communicating, leaders with ability to handle VUCA should always understand the other person's ability to understand and then communicate accordingly, right? And then we're talking about ensure the intent is understood. What I'm talking about here is, you've made your decision, you've made your intent clear, and your people have understood. But it's important that you have your people who have understood the intent to be with you and follow you. That is what we're three key things that can bring a leader to effectively manage the so-called VUCA environment. Now this is general in terms of what are the qualities and what are the three things important to handle a VUCA environment. Now when I go to the next slide, I will tell you about various things that's happened to me and how I've come up out of it. So let's take a look at, this is my career app, right? I started my job in 1993 as an hardware engineer. And that was the first time I faced a situation, but I wasn't a leader, I was an individual contributor. Because I come from an electrical engineering field, and then I had to jump into an hardware field without knowing too much on electronics industry, right? I don't have a depth of electronics field. But I still made a point that I will jump here to scale up my knowledge. And that time I was successful in handling the volatile situations around me, because every time people were talking about was bouncing. But the intentions I had was very clear. I used to go back home, sit down, understand what they were talking, document the keywords, and come out of it the next day, and I was prepared for the next day. When I went back to the on-site, the next job, there was one step beyond it, because here we're talking about hardware engineering, and then we moved into handling the software environment around it. But neither did I have this ability to understand the software environment. But I prepared around it, right? I did not get nervous with it. I did not feel this was the end of the world for me. I sat down and did not hesitate to ask. And when I was confused, I used to go into it, simulate the problem, read more books, ask the SMEs what this meant. And I used to use my network to build knowledge. And when I went into, when I finally was done with this job, I was ready, I was an expert in these two areas. Now that is when I had to go back and build and support an organization out here to build a strong capability which is encompassed of these two. I had to add value, right? I've learned, I've come across two roadblocks. I showed my value telling, yes, to be very successful in my understanding, I want to show my execution. And I showed my execution here and it turned out to be positive. Now, when I scaled up the country IT operations, imagine I was individual contributor all along here. But when I went here, I was given an opportunity to deal with business people in an enterprise organization, which was changing, evolving, because every time the sales people used to come and ask me something, they want the answer right now. And imagine the remote sales people sitting in Chennai and Hyderabad, they also went to ask the same question. Everything is now. There is no tomorrow, right? So that's the situation I faced. And when the market situations were changing, right, since I belong to the IT operations team, I was always in constant threat whether the organization would retain me or would send me back home. But I did not hesitate to continue to build my knowledge and bring some value. The only way I could bring more security to myself in this area was to partner with the sales team and bring a business value to them and make them feel that I'm just a partial IT guy, but I'm more of a business guy supporting them from the technology side. So I volunteered myself to add business value in the area of sales, in the area of going and meeting the customer, understanding the requirement, basically analysis, information gathering, and supporting the people there. Over the course of time, I actually broadened my support environment to pre-sales and engagement. Or I did that voluntarily. That is when I put a solid footprint for myself and became very secure with what I was doing. But everything was changing, the world was drifting away. It continued to drift more from the on-site model to the remote site model. And that is when I went back and took a role out here and said, okay, now that I've learned the whole of IT operation conceptually to be managed from site, what does it take for you to manage it remotely? And I put myself to complete commitment out here to ensure that I learned financial part of it, I learned the business part of it, and I also learned the so-called technology processes around it to build a solid framework and put the put these operations right in the radar of both HP and IBM. And today they're offering this as a forefront concept to win large deals. See how I've grown out here, right? With electrical diverse field, how I've handled volatility. Now in this role, I had major roadblocks, right? Number one, my health was not supporting. Second of all, the expansion was so rapid that the skill set, managing the skill set itself was different, right? Difficult because you can't go get people ready off the shelf and manage them. So you'll have to invest, basically get people with mature foundation, a strong foundation from the college, and then give them adequate knowledge to handle stage 1, and then over a course of 6 months, give them the stage 2 to handle their skills. So that was called the career development. That was also an area which I embedded here, and I learned here to be successful on the road. Having scaled up here, right, my next mission is to go ahead and organization, because with all these efforts and my, the volatility I've learned, several situations I've faced out here, I guess I would be able to deliver that as a whole by adding an organization, because right from the businesses, operations, as well as from the non-business HR and some on the financial part, everything can be executed out here, right? That's my confidence level. Now, I guess for me to get this path, the reason was very clear, right? I guess one of the leaders who were coaching me told me to be agile in the first place. So let me go back and show you the characteristics of a leader who can face all this volatility in their life to be a successful leader. So moving to the next slide, what are the characteristics of a leader to be successful, to be able to handle volatile situations? The first thing is, he has to be agile, right? Patient, the ability to handle situations, not to resist change. That's the characteristics of being agile. Now, every person will not have agile as a principle in his life. For such people, we should not hesitate to coach. Coach people to be agile ready, right? The characteristics should behave like agile leaders. The third or fourth is foster the organization's culture to reward UVCA behavior, which means, if you have to foster the organization, you have to foster right at all levels, right? So if an employee is displaying a UVCA behavior, his ability to handle volatile situations at any role, at any layer, the leadership's role becomes to go back and reward that person for demonstrating his ability to handle that. Now, the moment you do that, what the leader is doing is basically fostering the culture out there in the whole environment. And that's exactly what I got from my mentors around, and that is how I moved up my value chain so far with my 20 years of experience. Now, this is what I want to share with you in terms of how the other leaders should learn to be agile and foster agile characteristics in the organization. Thank you very much for being with me, and any feedback can you share with me. Thank you.